everyone. My name is Kevin Minton, and I'm the owner and CEO of Chief Executive Boards. I want to thank you for taking time to join us for today's webinar, Emotional Intelligence, the Human and Distinguishing Dimension of Leadership. Today, you're going to learn what every leader needs to know about emotional intelligence, including how to measure it, how it impacts your company's bottom line. Robin, I can't advance the slide. Can you advance it?
Sandy, are you not able to advance the slides?
Okay, thank you.
Okay, all right, I'm doing it. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. We're headquartered in Greenville, South Carolina, with executive peer advisory boards in multiple cities throughout the United States. And I'll be your host today. And I'd like to invite you to stay tuned for future webinars on our website, which is located at the bottom of this slide, where it says www.chiefexecutiveboards.com. Next slide, please. So before we just dive straight into our main topic, you may be curious to learn a little bit more about Chief Executive Boards. We are a boutique executive peer advisory service with local and national boards located throughout the eastern and Midwest states. Next slide, please. The purpose of Chief Executive Boards is to help Chief Executive Officers, presidents, business owners to share ideas and experiences to help avoid some of the pitfalls and potholes that many of you have already experienced. We really just help steer you from reinventing the wheel within your own businesses. Next slide, please. Our members convene in face-to-face forums and receive unvarnished advice in a safe and confidential environment that's really typically unavailable elsewhere. It's kind of like having your own personal think tank. Next slide, please.
I apologize. Sandy, if you're having issues advancing the slide, okay, there we go. It just takes a while. Sorry, I apologize.
Okay. Thank you. As an example, we address really what keeps you up at night. Items that you don't have an opportunity to discuss with anyone else. You can avail of our advisory local and national board forums and attend educational summits. You have access to other Chief Executive Board members, our libraries, our workshops, and webinars, along with a whole host of other items. From a housekeeping perspective, questions can be posted in the question panel box, and they will be answered after the webinar session. As a reminder, this webinar is being recorded and is available for you to review on our website. So let's get started with our webinar on emotional intelligence. Our guest presenter today, next slide please, is Ms. Sandy Blaha. And Sandy participates as a Chief Executive Board's International Advisor. She is the founder and owner of Blaha Performance Consulting, which is a performance management, leadership development, and succession planning company based in Denver, Colorado. She specializes in organizing or organizational capacity with a focus on aligning people, strategy, education, skills, and culture. Today, you're going to learn about the components of emotional intelligence and how it impacts your bottom line. You'll also be able to connect behaviors to the impact or cost in the workplace. You're going to learn methods and processes to measure and coach emotional intelligence. This webinar will last approximately 45 minutes to an hour, so we'll take a few minutes at the end for questions. Our contact details will be listed at the end of the presentation. And at this time, we'll turn over the webinar to our featured presenter, Ms. Sandy Baha. Sandy?
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. I'm happy to be here today and welcome all of you. This is a really important subject, and I'm going to talk to you in just a minute about the entire agenda. But let me just say this. I've been in business for 21 years, helping companies align people with their strategy and to make sure that they can execute on that strategy, to have skill sets that they need, and a culture in which they can effectuate their intentions. So what we're going to talk about today really has to do with the people aspect. And what we know about most companies' budgets is that your budget is about 75% related to all of the expenses of paying for your personnel, okay, including the benefits, training and development, and hiring. So it makes sense that you would leverage that people resource to the highest possible level. And it's sort of like the last notch in the competitive area of business to get more out of your personnel. And the great thing about it is it has wonderful benefits for you and your personnel. So what we're going to talk about today is what emotional intelligence is. We're going to talk about the business case. Why should you be concerned? What difference does it make to your bottom line? You're going to hear some examples of emotional intelligence and lack of it. And you're going to review a 4-quadrant model of emotional intelligence. And this is the thing I'm going to want you to take away. And you're going to see me go over it again and again because I sort of want to burn it into your thought process here as we go forward, so you'll have that one takeaway. You're going to identify emotional intelligence behaviors. Somebody's moving a mouse besides me. Let's see. Sorry. Okay. You're going to learn a process for improving emotional intelligence, how you can measure and coach it. And we're going to talk about how to do some action planning around emotional intelligence once you know what your challenges are. And let me say this. We're human beings, which means we're here on the planet. We're works in progress. We can all get better. And most of us have things that we can learn about our social and emotional intelligence and get better. So let me give you an example, and you'll see right away that you may not understand all the distinctions of emotional intelligence, but you do understand what emotional intelligence is already. So I once worked for a company. It was a 150-person professional services company, and they were in the process of expanding geographically. They were going to be acquiring companies strategically in geographic areas where they needed to expand. The current CEO was getting ready to retire within a few years, so he invited the board members, the principal stockholders, those that wanted to come forward to be the next CEO to let him know. And that's about the time that I entered the company. There were 2 people that came forward. One was named Dina and one was named Rick. Rick was the one person that the outgoing CEO really wanted to succeed him because he had groomed him over a period of time. So let me tell you about Rick and let me tell you about Dina, and I'd like you to decide which one you would choose for the next CEO based on their emotional intelligence. So they were both smart enough to do their jobs. They had the intelligence, right? But let me just tell you, Rick was the operations director for about 4 years when this process started. And he had been to all the strategic planning sessions. He had been given major responsibility to carry through and execute on many of those strategies. And what we found is that he had not followed through, he had not executed, and therefore he wasn't trusted. He also had a tendency to say whatever his boss wanted to hear. and therefore his boss was pretty happy with him. But most of the people around him didn't trust him because he said what people wanted to hear, and then they would find out later that his process was different. He also was not good at building bonds across the organization. So as an internal person, he really didn't carry a lot of faith and trust. Dina, on the other hand, was top of her field. She spoke at all of the conferences about their particular specialty area. She could go into a hospital and work with their combined boards of nurses, administrators, foundation leaders, facilities people, and doctors, which were external to the organization, and forge a single direction within 1 or 2 meetings. Now, if you were in acquisition mode, who would you want to promote? And I know you're all thinking, well, of course, Dina, right? It seems pretty obvious to most of us. So what I'm just demonstrating to you is, you know what emotional intelligence is. You may not just have some of the verbiage behind what all of that means, and that's what we're going to do today. So we'll have time, as Kevin said, for Q&A at the end, so please keep your questions noted. All right, so emotional intelligence is not new. According to research, Aristotle said something like, you know, it's not unusual for us to get angry, but how you get angry and how you use your anger is what we think about today as emotional intelligence. There's a right time and a right purpose and a right way to approach it. So this one skill that I want you to take away, if not others, but one awareness, is that you can break the framework of emotional intelligence up into these 4 quadrants: self-awareness, self-management, relationship management, and other awareness. And we're going to come back to this over and over again, because this will allow you to think about, as you're coaching an employee, a vendor, supplier, or client or customer, you can think about these 4 areas and think about, wow, where do I need to focus to help this conversation go better or this relationship go better? And as well, where might some of my challenges be? So in kindergarten, I don't know about you, but I was graded on works and plays well with others. We were expected to have social and emotional intelligence. You can have the highest intelligence, IQ, and many times we want to promote our most technical people. But if you don't combine that with emotional intelligence, then you've got a challenging leader and executive, and that sets a bad role model, right? So the challenge that we have is that we've really, really focused on intelligence, and as I said, intelligence is important, but I want to illustrate another way of thinking about it today. All of us can improve our emotional intelligence, and the way we do that is to make the invisible visible through assessment. How are we rated by ourselves and or others on our emotional intelligence? We then provide some education and coaching to define which are the 1 or 2 most problematic behaviors that we need to change if
Kevin, I believe we've just lost connection with Sandy.
Okay.
Let's see if we can get her back on here quickly.
We apologize for the technical difficulties, but that's technology, people. So unfortunately, these kind of things happen. Just bear with us.
Hello?
Hi.
My apologies. I got another call on the same line, and I hit the wrong button. I hope you'll excuse me. So anyway, hopefully you had time to think of a question, and Kevin tap danced for me. So We want to be able to understand what our current behavioral challenges are. We have education and coaching, and then we map the action plan for the 1 or 2 areas that need improvement. So why is emotional intelligence critical now? Because knowledge and relationships are essential. Emotional intelligence does link to the bottom line, and I'll show you that in a minute. And you can learn to improve your emotional brain. The concepts behind emotional intelligence relate to things like time and stress management, client service, assertiveness, accountability, and how we handle stress is one of the most important aspects. So let me tell you a brief story about a client, and his name is Stan. And Stan was the sort of the public relations face of the firm, and that he held the largest client. And he serviced that client very well. Everybody said, for the next generation of leaders, we want Stan in there. He's got a great personality. He's really smart. Our clients like him. But I kept hearing a but, and I had to inquire and inquire because people would say his communication skills aren't good. And I had to dig down and find out that that's not what they meant. And that's part of what we want to learn when we talk about emotional intelligence. We want to understand the distinctions within emotional intelligence. And what I found is that when something went wrong, Stan tended to blame someone else. He didn't take responsibility. And he was far enough along in his career that he should have heard feedback about this already, but he hadn't. I was the first person that he'd heard that from. And of course, he wasn't as trusted as he should have been because he didn't have all 3 of these aspects. And that's why the point I want to get across. You can have a great personality. You can be really smart. But if you don't know how to handle yourself well with others, there's going to be a deficit that's going to cost you money and time and stress. So again, I want to remind you that when you're thinking about emotional intelligence, think about yourself, think about others, and think about self-awareness, other awareness, self-management, and relationship management. This is just another view of the 4 quadrants that helps you frame where the missing pieces are, okay? So Stan was really lacking in self-awareness, in self-management, and relationship management, and other awareness, because to blame someone else rather than take responsibility as a manager and leader, he was blind to this particular behavior. And that's part of what we're trying to do with emotional intelligence, is understand our weaknesses, and if we have a blind spot, learn to understand it. There are many distinctions within social emotional intelligence, and these come from the social emotional intelligence profile. There's 4 different assessments that I'm aware of, and I've used this one quite a bit. And here you can see things like catalyzing change, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later when we dive deeper into these distinctions. So how would we describe emotional intelligence? Being aware of our emotions and the emotions of others, the 4 quadrants we just went over, monitoring that awareness and using it to manage ourselves and our relationships, and ultimately improving our ability to get results. The business case for emotional intelligence is that there is high return on investment of good or great EI, and I'm going to give you examples in a minute. Increased profit, better retention of top performers, more successful recruitment, and greater productivity. So what you want to know is that everyone can improve emotional intelligence. These are behavior changes. However, most of us need a good plan and a good execution strategy, which is where the assessment and coaching and education comes in. So let me show you some hard data around this issue. Lack of personal awareness among leaders is the #1 cause of declining and failing businesses. And I'll show you the data resources for all of these in a minute. Employees take their cues from their leaders on how to act. We all know that. People quit their supervisor. They rarely quit their company. Okay? that they don't get along well with their manager and supervisor, they're not likely to stay with your company. Also, people can act out if you have low emotional intelligence in your managers and leaders, because people will follow their cue. 76% of business issues are people and relationship related, and 24% are technical and financial. And Dr. Deming, the great quality guru that some of you may know about, he advocated this. He said it was as high as 90% of issues are people and relationship, and 10% are technical. So it depends where you look for this data. But what we know is that you can get more out of your people if they are emotionally intelligent and are aware of that, and you can leverage that to your bottom line. Sales in companies with high value on relationships are much higher. Profit runs higher in companies that rate highly in emotional intelligence. And employees with high achievement, motivation, empathy, and self-confidence are more productive. That just makes sense, doesn't it? So in terms of emotional intelligence training and assessment and coaching, there's many, many companies, and I can't show you all of these case studies. I'm going to give you highlights of a few case studies of how these companies proved emotional intelligence delivered to their bottom line. So let's take profitability first. A multinational consulting firm did a pilot, okay, and their partners were assessed on emotional intelligence. They had decided previously that there was 9 key competencies that when there was higher scores, those people delivered more. And so they began to train and develop people in these 9 competencies. Those 9 competencies delivered on average 1.2 million more profit to their accounts compared to those that did not have those 9 competencies. And that's what I mean by a pilot. Many of these case studies tested this model by saying, let's see what a successful, emotionally intelligent person in this job does, and those that deliver us the highest return on investment, and then compare that to those that didn't. And then, of course, you can train your constituents, those that are in the job, on those 9 competencies. Now, emotional intelligence also impacts retention. I talked about this earlier. How long an employee stays at a company and how productive they are is determined by their relationship with their immediate supervisor. And what we know is people with high emotionally intelligent supervisors are 4 times less likely to leave than those with low emotionally intelligent bosses. And here at the bottom of each, you see the reference. So if you wanted to look this up, when you get the slides tomorrow, I'll show you the link for that. Okay, recruitment. This is the longest case study I'm going to go through, and it has to do with the U.S. Air Force. They were having a 50% turnover problem in their recruiters. So what they did with their pilot, program, is they determined that it was costing them $30,000, which was 1998. That, to me, is a pretty low figure for replacement of a recruiter, but that was the figure that they quoted. What they did, they started to use emotional intelligence assessment instruments in the selection process for their new recruiters, and they were able to triple their success in obtaining highly emotionally intelligent recruiters who then were able to stay with the work. And that resulted in a $3 million savings for them annually. So how did they set up their pilot program? They created a competency model of the strongest recruiters, and they found that there were 5 EI competencies that were most important. They screened their new recruiters for those 5 skills. They trained incumbents in those 5 skills, and that was everybody that was already in those jobs, and their retention rate went from 50 to 96% in 1 year. That resulted in that $3 million savings. So let's talk about how this relates to productivity. In this case study is L'Oreal. Their sales agents were selected for specific emotional intelligence competencies those that sold 91,000 more, and that increased their net revenues to the bottom line by $2.5 million in the first year. What they found is those same salespeople with those high EI skills, there was much less turnover. And again, here you see the quotation for where you can find this research. At the very bottom of the slide, and if you want to look this up right now, if you're trying to convince yourself or others that emotional intelligence is important, you can look up these studies on eiconsortium.org. What we know is that emotional intelligence relates to 70% of turnover of clients. That's a really high rate. And there's also lots of lost opportunity when a client turns over and or an employee. 50% of time wasted in business is due to lack of trust, an important emotional intelligence competency. And turnover of employees or their career derailers are emotionally intelligence related. So some of you may know about the Center for Creative Leadership, and the Center for Creative Leadership has identified these 4 career derailers as the top 4 career derailers for people that intend to progress in their career, but they fail or they can't progress. Inadequate ability to build teaming skills. I just was at a presentation from the University of Colorado Construction and Management Engineering, and they have proven that successful construction projects are completely related to team cohesion and integration and team chemistry, which is what I've been saying for 21 years, but now we have the data to show it. So the inability to lead an effective team is a career derailer. Poor interpersonal relationships, inflexibility, particularly handling change poorly. And this one, it seems so apparent to me, but the inability to accept feedback when someone has criticism for you. So these should be red flags for you if you have any of these behaviors in your up-and-coming managers. The kind and compassionate and smart thing to do is to help them see, like Stan, what he hasn't been able to see before, so he has an opportunity to change. So again, I want you to take a look at what are some of the distinctions between, among these areas: self-awareness, other awareness, self-management, and relationship management. So I'm going to dig in a little deeper now. And don't forget, if you have questions, you can start to write those into the chat box to Robin. So self-awareness. These are components like emotional awareness, accurate self-assessment, personal power. So the ones that are asterisked are those that have been proven to be absolutely essential if you're going to the executive level. If you know that when you get angry or stressed, you have certain behaviors that go against the grain, that you take things out on other people around you, that emotional awareness and how you're handling your stress is really important. So if we think back on Dina in my first example, how she handled personal power was important because people trusted her. That was not the case with Rick. Now, I can't say that Dina was perfect. We had to coach her to quit saying I and start saying we. She still had some things to learn. We all do. But for the most part, people knew that she was there first for the organization, whereas in the example of Rick, he appeared to be there first for himself. And that should be a distinction when you go forward as an executive in an organization, that you are first for the organization, and your interests then need to align with the organization. You need to understand how they align. And if they don't, you're probably not in the right place. Okay, self-management. What are some of the distinctions? I'm not showing you all the distinctions in each category. I'm giving you some examples. Okay. Emotional and behavioral self-control. I'm going to show you an example of this particular competency in just a little bit and how we coach it. Integrity. Integrity is an asterisk. If we looked at Rick in the example of Dina and Rick, integrity was not something that most people put in the same sentence with Rick because they didn't trust him. And most companies say integrity is important, but they don't break it down into what does that actually mean. Okay? So that was something Rick had to learn about. Innovation and creativity, an initiative and bias for action. We know in this example that Dina had initiative and people trusted that if she said she was going to do something, she would find a way to do it. Resilience, that is you bounce back, you're flexible. Achievement and drive. Stress management, realistic optimism, that is you're realistic and you make a mistake, you pick yourself up and you go forward. Intentionality, being clear about your intentions and helping other people be clear about theirs. So what are some of the distinctions in other awareness? Empathy. Now, we know that most executives aren't the best at empathy. However, the better you can put yourself in others' shoes, the more effective you're going to be. You can listen to your clients and your employees and really hear what their challenges are. Being of service, organizational awareness. I'm just going to give you a clue here. If you have a manager or leader, senior leader, or even a high potential person who wants to move forward in their career and you believe in them and you can see that they're capable, you want to move them around to work in various parts of the organization so they understand how all the components of the organization come together excuse me, to be effective. Understanding how to navigate the organization is a huge executive competency, how all the pieces and parts fit together. So that's why that one is asterisk. In terms of relationship management, the ability to develop others, share work, delegate, the ability to influence others, to take your vision and your intentions and to translate that into what does that mean in our work today. Communication, conflict management, visionary leadership, and catalyzing change. Those last two, visionary leadership and catalyzing change, were things that Dina exhibited, and that is why people selected her as the primary front runner. Not her boss, not the CEO, but the other stockholders selected her as the front runner for the CEO in the future. Also building bonds, something that we saw that Rick was not good at, teamwork and collaboration and building trust. So some of the distinctions within each, and we need to get better at understanding and articulating these various distinctions, because if you just say you're not good at building relationships, that you then need to dig down to that next level of what does that actually mean so the person can understand which behavior they need to change. However, if this is your first introduction to emotional intelligence, you can just think about these 4 major categories, and we can help you learn more about the distinctions. So going back to the example of Stan, what we want is someone who has good personality, knows themselves, is intelligent enough to do the job, which is a threshold competency. You have to be smart enough to do the job. But on top of that, your star performers are also going to be emotionally intelligent people, and that we can learn to improve emotional intelligence. So we can help people as they move forward in their careers and become your lieutenants, your senior leaders for the next generation. So emotional intelligence is a collection of skills. And again, this is another way of thinking about the 4 quadrants. Being aware of what's going on within me in the moment. Being aware of what might be going on with another person and responding to that. Managing ourselves in the moment. Managing our relationships with others. You can use emotional intelligence in hiring. I use a system called top grading, and we're going to be talking about that next month, to make sure you're asking the right questions when you are hiring. But you're going to want to ask some questions about, tell us about a time when you had a difficult employee and how you handled that and how you managed that. So you can use your hiring questions to determine whether the person has emotional intelligence. And you can ask that question from several different directions. Tell us about a time when you had a difficult client, and tell us about a time when you made a mistake and how you handled that. These are all emotional assessments, emotional intelligence distinctions that you can ask in interviews. When you promote people, again, you're going to want to let people know that you want people that are smart enough to do the job, know themselves and their personality and how to use their strengths, and have emotional intelligence. Succession planning feeds right into that. Promote people to your next generation of leadership who are emotionally intelligent. Leadership development, you want early education on emotional intelligence so people can make corrections early in their careers and not late in their careers, but even old dogs can learn new tricks. So help people like Stan, and I helped Rick be more aware. Mergers and acquisitions, an excellent time to see who are we going to keep, who are we going to cut when you are merging and acquiring. Who are the most important personnel to carry you forward? People that have all three of these skill sets in a very big picture sense. So let's look at a scale, emotional intelligence. And here on the left-hand side, you can see some of the distinctions of emotional intelligence we've been discussing. And you can see that this actually is an assessment that I took many years ago. And it was really good for me to take this. And you can see that I rated myself. I'm not sure others would rate me exactly the same because we tend not to be the best evaluators of ourselves. It's best to have others take a look as well. But I rated myself exceptional in some areas, strong in some areas. I rated myself average in emotional self-control. And it's because a story that I tell myself is that I don't have time to waste, which is true. But I wasn't actually being as effective as I wanted to be when I would have an upset. So I needed to do the assessment to make the invisible visible about where I was struggling. I sort of knew that in the back of my mind, but it helped me solidify it. I needed to get some education and coaching on what to do about it. I needed to develop an action plan. So I'm going to walk you through this. So first of all, I need to know, if it's a blind spot for me, I need to know who can I watch. Now, I watch my husband on a daily basis. We share an office, and he's also a coach. And so when he's on the phone and he's trying to get assistance from someone, he is the sweetest man you've ever met in your life. He asks about the other person, how they're doing, what's going on. So I watched him, okay? He pours on the honey, and of course the bees come, right? So people with this competence, I needed to understand this. They manage impulsive feelings and distressing emotions. They stay composed. They're unflappable. They restrain negative reactions. They think clearly under pressure, which for me was monitoring my story in my head, because the story in my head was, I don't have time to waste right now. And if I just said, hey, this person isn't trying to waste my time, I need to get the best outcome possible. How can I behave differently to get that result? I need to choose not to escalate if I'm upset, and I need to remain cool under pressure. So people who lack this competence do some of the things that I was doing, being impulsive, being non-constructive, being quick to anger, tending to be defensive, and becoming angry. And all of those things did not help me get the result that I wanted. And all of which, I also teach a class called Crucial Conversations. And what I've learned over the years is that the story we create in our head is the story that we act out of. That's our emotional response comes from that. So really monitoring my stories was very helpful. So what was my action plan? To identify, excuse me, I'm going to take a sip of water. To identify what trips my trigger. Well, what trips my trigger was really the story I was telling myself. So I had to be aware of what those stories were. To develop a strategy to respond effectively to each one of those, and to develop an accountability partner. That is someone to help me be accountable. And my husband has always been very good at saying, wow, you didn't handle that very well. What could you have done differently? So I needed to also remind myself in the heat of the moment to use a more constructive process to remind myself of these strategies that I had selected, and certainly to improve my self-talk. If I don't handle the situation well right now, it's going to cost me more time. So why don't I just give up my ego-based response? So this was of great help to me. I don't have these challenges anymore, but it really came through the lens of becoming more self-aware. So this is just a view of a graph from the 360 review. And the 360 review for Rick, the person I talked about early on, who wanted to be the CEO of this company, we looked at his catalyzing change feedback from other reviewers. Okay, the average overall rating of 13 people was 4.3. He and his boss rated him the highest, okay, for 5.6 on a 6-point scale. His direct reports rated him fairly well. He had a pretty good relationship with his direct reports, but you can see here that his peers, the other shareholders in the company, did not rate him well. They did not trust him. They did not like his behaviors. And those are the people he was going to be reporting to if he became the CEO. What we found here is that there were people that he had known for more than 20 years that said, I really don't know Rick. He did not know how to build bonds with people. He was so enclosed in his own, what he wanted to achieve, that he really wasn't for the company first. Now, given this company was in the mode of acquisition, this did not engender a lot of trust in his leadership. So this just shows you just one of the scales in the 360 review. Now, I'm very fond of Warren Bennis. He was a professor at Stanford University, and I like his quote here, which I'm going to end with. In the fields that he studied, emotional intelligence is more powerful than IQ in determining who emerges as a leader. Your IQ is a threshold competence. You need to be smart enough and have the skills to do your job. You need it, but it doesn't make you a star. Emotional intelligence is that final piece that's required. So how do you enhance your emotional intelligence in the workplace? With assessment, training, and coaching. And you can find research on all the case studies here at eiconsortium.org. One thing that I offer, how do you access these tools, is I'm trained in 4 different EI competencies. Right now I'm using Matrix Insights Dashboard because the learning tools online are becoming pretty darn sophisticated. And I use the EI dashboard. I usually start with emotional competence. It includes 4 competencies in the assessment process. The 4 competencies are emotional, the 4 assessments are emotional competency, interaction styles, essential motivators, and personality. And what we're able to do is, again, show you what those emotional competencies are, help you choose 1 or 2 that you want to improve upon, make an action plan. And then the wonderful thing about this dashboard is you then set up those particular areas of self-learning to send you weekly reminders of the areas you need to be working on. And I will say this, nobody can work on 10 things at once, but we can work on 1 or 2 items. So for a short time, I'm offering a special on accessing and learning this dashboard and coaching on emotional competence. As you purchase it, you also have access to the entire dashboard. So do give me a call, or you can email me, Sandy with a Y at sandyblaha.com, if you would like to set up a conversation about that. So at this point, I think we are ready to take your questions, and I'm going to turn it back to Kevin and Robin. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Sandy. At this point, please let me remind you that this webinar is being recorded, and it's going to be sent in the form of a web link via email. It really concludes the presentation portion, but we will take a few minutes to entertain a few questions from the audience. Robin, do we have any questions?
Sure, we do. We actually have a number of questions, so if we don't get to your question today, we will send an email, or Sandy will send an email with an answer for that. The first one we have is from Nate. Any suggestions on how to deal with clients or peers outside your organization that just won't react to your best EI efforts?
Wow, that's a tough one. Nate, I feel for you. So you have a difficult client, if I understand it. And if you said clients and peers. Generally, it's the hardest thing to realize is it's probably not, it may not be what you're doing. It may be their own lack of emotional intelligence. I would really, there's some other areas I would focus on, which is what are their primary motivators? What are they trying to, what are the goodies that they need? And I think about those in 3 different categories. Are you making them feel significant? Are you demonstrating enough structure and control to be to demonstrate competence? And are you taking the time to connect with them and build relationships? So those 3 areas, significance, competence, and relationship, could be areas that you could look at and see if you can connect to their intrinsic motivators. Now, this is going beyond emotional incompetence to some other skill sets, but you may have a blind spot in one of those, and that may be their primary need. So I'm happy to talk to you offline about that. The other thing is when we talk about crucial conversation skills, this may be a crucial conversation, particularly with the client, that you need to work through. You may need to say, we seem to have some rough spots in our relationship. Can you tell me about that? Can you tell me what I could do differently? So there's a lot to say about that. They may tell you where you have a lack of an emotional competence that you're not aware of. So I'm going to end there because you said you have other questions. And Nate, I'm happy to talk to you more. Okay.
And the next question is from Joseph. And he asked, what should I do if I have a high performer that burns themselves out? That burns themselves out working rather than sharing and delegating.
Aha. Wow, that's a big challenge, right? So the emotional competencies there are something that you're going to want to make apparent to that individual. And it could be that some assessment would help him see, but he might need a 360 emotional competency to see what his blind spot is. Obviously, the person doesn't trust other people. And, the thing we all tell ourselves is if I do it myself, it'll be done right, and I can do it faster. But that means that the people around them don't get to learn. So I think with this particular person, I would help them with an emotional intelligence 360. And oftentimes you can't single out a single person in your team to say, you know what, you need some help, you need to do this. So another way to do that is to have a small team of people take the emotional intelligence profile, and then that person doesn't feel singled out. If they're open to feedback, I would suggest the emotional intelligence competencies assessment, and then with some education and coaching, they can choose to look at what is up with them with trusting other people. That's going to be the feedback they're going to need, is that really limits their career advancement. Okay. I'll take the next question.
Next question is, this is from Jennifer. How do I use emotional intelligence assessment, training, and coaching to retain top performers?
Okay, great question, retention. Okay, so let me just say this. If you have managers, supervisors, leaders that do not have high emotional intelligence, you're going to have a challenge retaining Jennifer, okay? So, or someone who's reporting to them, so to speak. So what you need to do is make sure that you really expect emotionally intelligent behavior, social and emotional intelligence from all of your managers. So that's a good place to start with your management and leadership. The other thing is that if you have a high potential person and you know that they may be out looking for a job, they're highly qualified, you have great desire for them in the future, what you can do is get them some of this emotional intelligence training, the dashboard that I showed you a minute ago, give them some information on themselves and how they can get better, so that early on you're investing in them. And that kind of investment, particularly by the millennial generation, creates a lot more loyalty and appreciation, because they're seeing that you're taking an interest in their career. So those are two ways. Look at your senior managers and leaders, get them some assistance, and then take your high potentials and give them some early training so that they don't end up like Stan. Stan was pretty much a high performer, except that he needed to get some feedback on accountability a whole lot earlier in his career. Okay, I'll end there with that question. Next question?
Sure, and this will be the last question for today. This is from Chuck.
Okay.
What is the investment to have my team assessed, debriefed, and coached in EI?
You know, I hate to quote dollar figures because I don't know the size of the team, but the actual dashboard that I showed you a second ago, which you only could see briefly here on the previous slide, the investment for that is only $75 per person. Now, if you do a 360, it's a lot higher. Now, you need to wrap around that the education, coaching, and training. So right now, for just a limited number of people for a short period of time, I'm offering the entire dashboard, orientation, coaching, planning for $2,500 for 10 people. But that is, you know, it's perhaps larger than the number of people you want to go through. It's just a great way to tackle a whole group of leaders and managers at once. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of information. I'm happy to customize that one-to-one. So let's see. I think I need to turn it back, Robin, now to Kevin. Is that correct?
To Kevin. That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Well, thank you for your questions and your engagement today. I want to remind you that this webinar was hosted by CEBI, and I want to invite you to visit our website for some additional insights and upcoming events, such as the webcast that you see listed on this slide here. I'd like to thank our presenter, Sandy Blaha, and I hope that you found this helpful. I invite you to contact Chief Executive Boards with any questions. I can direct you towards Sandy as well. And I invite you to join us for future webinars. We look forward to speaking with you regarding your future engagements with Chief Executive Boards and Blaha Performance Consulting. And I wish all of you a great week ahead. Thank you and farewell. This concludes our webinar.